matters now, because as the clock continues to tick in this experiment we call America, it's very clear that the radical left is reaching a fever pitch. When you look at Democrats, they push their agenda 100% all of the time. And one of the big complaints and frustrations within Republican Party politics right now is that a lot of Republicans just think that we're back in 1995. And if we don't get it right this time, we'll get it right next time, and that we're all just working together, right? Well, we don't believe that's the case. And so that's why we're highlighting some of these very important statewide elections that are happening right now in the Republican primary in Ohio, because we've had a continual revolving door amongst candidates and statewide office holders. And quite frankly, the establishment has proven to most of us in the cheap seats that they're just not willing to go all the way. And so now I'd like to welcome our next guest onto the show, pro-gun former legislator and friend of Ohio gun owners, Jay Edwards, who is running for the Ohio State Treasurer. And he's going to explain to us, and I'll kind of go through his record here in just a little bit. But before we do, I want to let you know that anybody that we have on this show has already signed the Ohio Gun Owners Candidate Survey for that particular office, 100% pro-gun. But welcome aboard, Jay. Thanks for joining us here today. And just give a little bit of details on how the office of Ohio State Treasurer affects people's gun rights.
No. So I was in the legislature, as you know. One of my biggest regrets, I termed out at the end of 2024. One of my biggest regrets is we had a bunch of squishy Republicans that we couldn't get the Second Amendment Preservation Act done. I remember coming to those committees, even though I wasn't on the committee.
Yes.
We even had some of the institutional guys like Bill Seitz and some of these guys pushing to get this done, and taking on some of the folks that were naysayers on that bill. Everyone's talking about Blue 22. Jason Stevens was trying to get that bill passed, more so than anyone in the Senate was trying to get that bill passed. The Senate had every right to offer that piece of legislation and try to get it passed. To my knowledge, they never did. And
Correct.
So we understand that the problem now is at the leadership position. So I took on this role of I termed out at the end of 2024 and kind of went home, and I watched everything happening with our freedoms. I watched, 6 years post-COVID, we still don't have medical freedom in this state. We have these outside entities, these outside private equity groups, and BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, and they're coming in and throwing these data centers at us right now, raising our electric bills, getting tax abatements, and more of the corporate welfare. And I thought, for sure the state was going to do something on this property tax issue that really came to a head right as I was leaving office, and our electricity bills. And what I saw was the state of Ohio in the next budget gave $600 million for the Cleveland Browns to build a new football stadium, set aside $1.7 billion for sports stadiums in general. I'm not against football. I played college football. I love football. By the time people in my district pay their property tax and electric bills, they can't afford to buy a ticket to the taxpayer-funded stadium. So, that was ridiculous. So that kind of what threw me into the race. I got a late start from my competition. But the state treasurer's office, I pushed for years against these BlackRocks and Vanguards and all this ESG stuff that we're seeing in banking and investments. These outside entities, we all know it's coming from the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum and all these outside entities that want to unipower the entire world. And, they don't have our best interest at heart. And so I've talked about this as my time as a state lawmaker. I see it even more now. There always tends to be discriminatory practices that take place, and they always tend to go against conservatives. So whether it's deplatforming from social media, whether it's debanking gun organizations, the Trump organization was debanked by Bank of America. BlackRock and Vanguard are pushing this ESG and DEI nonsense, saying that you can't release too much carbon in the atmosphere. You got to have LGBTQ people on their board. Yeah. For some reason, though, we've seen these big banks that are majority owned by BlackRock because they own everything. We've seen these big banks, not giving loans to gun manufacturers, not allowing ammo manufacturers to play. But yet the state of Ohio, which Trump won by 8, 8, and 11, super majority Republican in the House, super majority Republican in the Senate, Republican Supreme Court, all the statewide office holders, yet we're still doing business with them. We're still allowing your taxpayer money to go to the Bank of America and go to Chase and all these banks that just a few years ago. It's funny, those guys now are trying to act like they're, cool because we have a new head guy in charge in DC and Donald Trump. But it was only in 2023 that they were playing this nonsense. And I talked to these, it's similar in the gas industry or the gun manufacturer, any of these people, they're getting their loans pulled, they're getting their insurance pulled, and it's all coming from the BlackRocks and Vanguard. So what I want to do is not just be a trustworthy partner of making sure we call balls and strikes on how the legislature is spending your money stupidly, but also we're going to make sure our investments match up with the principles and morals of the state of Ohio. And yeah, I'm the only one, believe it or not, in this race or even on the statewide ticket that are talking about these things. We have these statewide office holders that, talk about the verticals of their office. They have no problem attacking a Democrat mayor who's not friendly with the police. They have no problem attacking Joe Biden when he's the president of the United States. But yet they won't. But yet they won't call out other Republicans for some of the things they do, and they'll say, "Well, that's not in my wheelhouse." But really, what they're worried about is, well, I'm going to tick off one of their donors, or I'm going to tick off their endorsement. They won't endorse me for my next office, or I don't want to upset Mike DeWine, or whatever the case may be. And so, we got to get away from that. I'm running around. I'm getting a good response of, I remember being a kid. My grandpa used to say, I pay a lot of money in taxes and I don't trust the federal government on how they're spending my money. That has seeped over into the state government right now. And unless we do something about it and we track every dollar and we make sure the investments match up with the state of Ohio. And for some reason, I'm the only person on the campaign trail. I'm hearing Marcel talk about this quite a bit as well. But we got to talk about these things. And quite frankly, if we aren't going to hold Republicans' feet to the fire, then no one is. The members have. We saw it during COVID of trying to get Amy Acton to open our stuff back up. It didn't do anything. It's incumbent upon statewide office holders, state elected officials, Republicans calling out their own pot fire and holding their feet to the fire on issues that people care about. And when it comes to the state treasurer's office, we're going to make sure that our freedoms aren't trampled upon, and we're not going to do business with people and allow taxpayer money of conservative Ohioans to sit in banks or investment accounts of people that are trying to destroy conservatives. And they'll be right back up to their tricks as soon as Trump's out of office.
Yeah. One of the things that we, just to kind of further drill on your point there, one of the things that we've always said here at Ohio Gun Owners is that, when things are not going your way in a Republican supermajority state, it's not because of the Democrats, much as most of the legislators would like you to believe that's the case. And so, yeah, we fully support the idea that it's not only we have to talk about these things, but it's time for Republicans to start wielding political power in the same manner that the left is. We're big fans of Alinsky's rule that you have to force the enemy. And that's what they are at this point. They're the enemy. These companies, these global companies that you're talking about there, they're weaponizing every facet of American life against us. And for gun owners, that's particularly true. I'd like you to add U.S. Bank to the list.
Yes.
Of banks.
Oh, yes.
That are banking because they directly deplatformed Ohio gun owners.
Wow.
Over the years. And so, and once they did that, they went all the way in, and it was all personal accounts because we were tied to those political entities. It was personal accounts. It was kids' lawn mowing accounts. They went all the way in on that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, under no circumstances should Ohio tax dollars be parked in those great, big, massive anti-American organizations. So what's your thoughts on that we have to move from this talking endlessly, because Republicans have done that great for years.
Yeah, at least when the Democrats are there, we know who our enemy is. Right now, it's like a sheep in wolf's clothing. We're trying to fight our own party, and most people don't realize it. Most people have their lives to live. They're working every day. They're trying to put food on their kids' plates, and so they think, well, we got Republicans in the state house, so we're fine. They're taking care of stuff. We got to open our eyes, and part of that is no one talks about it. We talked for 72 hours in this state about Somali fraud in South Columbus. By the way, the second biggest Somali population in the country behind Minneapolis. Exactly. Everyone's beating up on Minneapolis because they don't like Tim Walz, and Republicans have no problem doing that. I talked to JD a couple of weeks ago, his team. I said, hey, JD, don't forget about Ohio. You're on this fraud stuff. I know you think it's a Republican state. We're the second highest Somali fraud organization. I've walked through the population. I've walked through these organizations at Columbus. Yeah. Home health agencies, all this sort of stuff. And I'm in rooms with a bunch of these statewide elected officials, including current state treasurer and others, and they're looking at me like, "Why are you talking about Somali fraud? It has nothing to do with the state treasurer's office." I said, "Because I think the state treasurer's office has got to hold Republicans' feet to the fire,
Absolutely.
and all you got to see is the leadership in the House and the leadership in the Senate have all endorsed against me. They're scared to death and the reason why, it isn't anything personal to me. They don't want somebody in there that's talk of issue because their feet to be held. That's the trust I used to talk about when I was a kid of the federal government is now in the state government. I want to restore that trust. I want people to know what's happening. You're not going to read about it in these worthless lefty publication news organizations. We got to bring the news to the people. It's what you guys do all the time. And quite frankly, I'm not just saying this because I'm on the phone with you. You guys are the only gun group really in Ohio. Everyone talks about the NRA. I'm a lifelong member of the NRA. They don't really have a presence in Ohio. There's the Buckeye Firearms Association, which is more of a sportsman type group. You look at some of their folks, they're contract lobbyists. So, they can't, they're representing a multitude of other people. How many clients do you represent, Chris? So, the problem is
actually thousands upon thousands of members.
Thousands of members, but how many organizazations?
Well, so various state level, but
all around the same issue. My point is these other groups, they got contract lobbyists, so they might have a lobbyist in the gas association, or they might have a lobbyist that cares about a county organization or something else. They can't run the risk that you don't care about. You're trying to push the truth. They can't run the risk of pissing off the Speaker of the House, because if I piss off the Speaker about this gun issue, well, now he's going to be mean to me on this natural gas issue I have, or be mean to me about this county level issue I have. So there's really only one organization in the state, and that's you guys, that are only focused on freedom, that are only focused on gun rights, that are only focused on expanding, making sure that, I always said too, if I was in the legislature, a lot of these, pro-gun, we'll call them Republicans in Columbus, they're obsessed over things like concealed carry. They obsess over things like, when the police show up, and I always voted on all those bills.
Yeah.
We've lost the plot if we're talking about concealed carry.
That's exactly right.
Quite frankly, if I was around when concealed carry came around, which was probably considered very pro-gun and probably was brought to by Republicans, I would have fought against it, because why do you need a license? I don't need a license. The Second Amendment of the Constitution gives me every right I need. And by creating these little hurdles, now they claim it's pro-gun and Democrats hate it, but at the same time, it's creating barriers of entry that in reality, I have all the protections I need. I don't need any other protections. So, and a lot of Republicans still to this day will make these little minute thing. Oh, we made it so when the cop comes up and you got your concealed carry license, now you don't have to tell them, and they'll be able to do this, and you can't get in trouble.
Yeah,
that's bullcrap. That's not expanding freedoms of anybody in this state. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's frittering at the edges, and a lot of people have always asked us, why do you guys, if you guys use a little more sugar and a little less salt, you'd probably, make better friends in the legislature. And we're like, we're true believers in the Second Amendment. That's why we always say in committee hearings, it's like when the Democrats or some of the quizzling rhinos will ask you questions, we always just go right back to the real intent of the Second Amendment, which was a bulwark against tyrannical governments. And as we've seen in the last lockdown years, American government or American politicians can quickly try to accumulate power themselves and become tyrannical as well. And our founding fathers knew that absolute power absolutely corrupts. Absolutely. So thanks for spelling that out.
Yes.
I was going to ask you what your opinion of the Second Amendment was. And just so everybody knows, Jay Edwards has co-sponsored and jumped on every single one of OGO's priority bills. And it went even further than that. And maybe I'm not supposed to tell this story, but back in the day when we were pushing constitutional carry, Jay Edwards was asked to come up to Columbus and run an amendment that gutted constitutional carry, and gave me a phone call and said, hey, what's going on with this amendment? And I'm like, well, they're trying to gut it and make it just a permitless carry instead of a full expansion to concealed weapons license. He's like, oh, well, I'm off of that committee now, and gave us a heads up so we could mobilize against that. So, I mean, and so for legislators that are willing to do that, it's automatically puts you in a different category than others because at that point, you're basically going against leadership. And that kind of, I want to touch on one thing you just talked about, because if you look at some of the other candidates that are running right now and legislatively in particular, you see the establishment gun lobby coming in endorsing every single one of the establishment picks for those offices. And the reason why is because more than anything, these legislators, the establishment in Ohio wants the status quo to be maintained. And they do not want to let go of the levers of power at all costs. And one day it will cost us. And I think we're in a situation right now where there's so many people in the base level, single issue gun voters or life voters or whatever, who are sitting here and they're not trying at the gubernatorial level in particular. They're not trying to sit there and figure out, am I going to go vote for Vivek or Amy Acton or Casey or Amy Acton in the general election? They're trying to figure out, am I going to go vote at all, or should I just go drink beer? Because I'm getting pretty much the same results out of the Republicans, whether or not I go vote, which is not much, nothing right now, actually, when it comes to gun bills. So
when you look at the other gun organizations in Ohio, I'll say they just endorsed someone for state representative that carried red flag law bills in Eastern Ohio. He was my state senator at the time. I don't know what the hell he was thinking by doing that against a guy that was good on every gun bill, good on every freedom bill. So that tells you everything you need to know. These guys take direction from the top. They get their direction from the speaker or from the Senate president or from the governor that tells them who they want in there. Has nothing to do about the actual issue. It's all about playing favoritism, and we wonder why we've gone down this path. And you brought up something that I think is really important. We're only a couple steps away from these rights being infringed upon. We know the Democrats and at the federal level are gonna immediately get rid of the filibuster and do whatever they got to do and impeach Trump and all that sort of stuff. But let's not forget. Let's not have short-term memory and forget. We just saw our freedoms get trampled upon during COVID. We saw what they did to us. They came after every single one of our freedoms, shut down our businesses, shut down our schools. I still to this day, in a supermajority Republican Senate, how did Amy Acton get confirmed? She was an abortion doctor before she sat in front of before she sat in front of the Senate to get confirmed. Don't forget an
Obama campaign worker.
An Obama campaign worker selected by a Republican governor and selected by and nominated, had to get through the consent process of the state Senate and got appointed. And then, by the way, a bunch of people now, state senators, state reps, people that were around said, "Oh, we took back our power." Yeah, you took back her power a year and a half later. You didn't take back her power when everyone was complaining about it. Everyone sat on their hands. It was people like Ron Ferguson. It was people like me. It was people like DJ Swearingen that were pulling our hair out, sponsoring discharge petitions to try to force Bob Cupp to get Amy Acton. She shut down a primary. I know we talk about schools and businesses. She shut down a primary election in this state. We had an election during the Civil War, but we couldn't have it because of the sniffles. It was absolutely disgusting. So for people to think, oh, the Second Amendment's safe, there's nothing they can do about it. Just flash back 5 or 6 years ago and see what they did to us. This is one generation away from us not being able to defend ourselves, from us not being able to. And I'll tell you another funny story. You brought up the call I made to you. I was 27 years old when I first ran for state rep, and we had a governor at the time. For some reason, these governors we get in this state, we had a governor at the time named John Kasich. And, fast forward to 2020, he spoke at the DNC. So that's what kind of governor he was. But he called me once. I was out to dinner, and he called me. I was down home in Southeast Ohio, and he called me and said, "Hey, Jay, I'd really like to meet with you tomorrow in my gubernatorial office." Now I'm 27, first-time state lawmaker. And I come up there and sit down. He's got his entire staff standing around the room. And he sits me down. It's very intimidating for a 27-year-old kid to go up there. And he's got his whole staff sitting around, and he tells me, and this is right after he got his butt kicked by Trump in the presidential primary, and he tells me he's going to offer a bill for red flag laws in the state, and he really wants me to carry that bill. And
Oh,
I say, Governor, number one, I'm a Trumper. Number two, you must not know where I'm from. If in God's country, in the hills of Southeast Ohio, even Democrats are card carrying members of gun organizations.
absolutely.
If you tried to, and I guarantee a lot of your membership are from my area because I hear about it a lot.
Absolutely. Very
If
heavy.
you had, if I would have sponsored red flag laws, they would have used their Second Amendment rights on me as their state representative.
Yep.
It wouldn't have gone over too well. And he just absolutely berated me in front of his staff and told me it's my job to go home and educate my people on how it is, on why we need this sort of stuff. And I said, Governor, I think you got it wrong. I work for these people. I don't work for me. But that was the mindset of what we had. Now we've seen red flag laws under this new governor, not a new governor, but Mike DeWine, who's getting ready to come out. Why can't we get a governor? I don't agree with everything he's done, but like Ron DeSantis is doing this stuff that citizens have to do in the state of Ohio if we want to get anything done. We have to do citizen-led ballot initiatives like on property taxes to get stuff done. But yet in Florida, they can do this sort of stuff. ESG, not investing in anti-gun and LGBTQ stuff. Texas led the charge. Florida was second. West Virginia, state right across the line, did it. And guess what they saw when they quit investing in BlackRock and anti-ESG policies? All those companies flew to town and told them you're going to lose all kinds of money because you're going to get less return on investment. Texas, Florida, West Virginia has seen an increase in their investment. And when you give money to these big banks, when you give money to these people that are playing politics with your taxpayer money, this isn't my personal money, your taxpayer money, you're going to see a lower return on investment. Not only that, you can't ensure that money's even being spent in Ohio. Why don't we give that money to our...
And honestly, that's an old story, especially for the coal areas of Ohio and also West Virginia. I think it's the same with these data centers and stuff that are going up, solar farms that are going up all over the state. Massive amounts of tax dollars are being used to build out this infrastructure for these great big global companies, and all that money is going out, and it does not stay local.
No. And they hire, they get the red carpet. If you want to go down a funny rabbit hole, type in J. Edwards Jobs Ohio, one of the most corrupt organizations we have here in the state. They get the state liquor profits. They don't have to disclose anything they're going to do. They don't have to disclose anything. They're considered a private entity. They don't have to fill out financial disclosures, so they can also be personally invested. The CEO there makes $800,000-$900,000, $1 million a year. He can be personally invested, such in Intel, for instance, while they're handing over $2 billion to Intel, which didn't work out real well. And we have we know Jobs Ohio and some of these groups are going to sit here and roll out the red carpet in world of corporate welfare that we live in today to build these data centers. And yeah, it's a lot of good construction jobs on the front end. It's going to they're going to get tax abatement. It's going to raise your property taxes. It's going to raise your energy bills. And we don't know what it's going to do to the water and the water line system because it takes a ton of water to cool these things. But then once they're built, they hire 10 people. And there's no tax incentive to your local community. And by the way, in 5 or 6 or 7 years, there'll be new technology and we'll have a bunch of empty buildings sitting all over the state of Ohio. So these people don't care about us. We've been fooled by the big out-of-state private equity groups long enough. I think it's time. And I want to go back to one thing because I saw something yesterday. 2 days ago. I was down in Adams County, Ohio. And I'm really making a pitch for Ohio taxpayer money to sit in community banks. Rather than going to these big national conglomerate banks, let's go to the community banks. I walked into this community bank in Adams County, very prominent community bank in the area. All the community uses them. I walk in, what's the first thing I see? 10 Commandments written on the wall. Guns, Civil War era style gun in a gun cabinet up on the wall. These are the people we should do business with. Not only can you make sure that money stays in Ohio, it's going to stay right there in that local community it's going to give them more opportunity to loan for first-time home buyers, for these sorts of things. Instead of rolling out millions and billions to data centers, why don't we go into these communities, which, by the way, these communities I'm talking about that have these community banks that are staples in their community are the ones electing Republicans today. Republicans aren't being elected in Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati, but yet that's all we care about. $600 million for the Brown Stadium, all this nonsense. How about we go and try to help out these forgotten about areas? There's nothing we can do about them taking our coal mines away or hollowing out our industrial base and sending all our jobs to China. But how about let's go after the fact of trying to keep these people more money in these people's pocket, lowering their electric bills, lowering their property taxes, and give opportunity in some of these distressed areas, which, oh, by the way, an added benefit to that is they're voting Republican 80%.
Ohio government for the Ohio people and focusing on Ohio culture and its citizens. I mean, the idea has been anathema in both parties for so long. I think it's refreshing that this stuff is finally coming to the forefront of politics. And I think for a big reason why that's happening is because we were forced in the last 5 years to take stock of what really matters. And instead of prioritizing absolute maximum profit to these global entities, people are realizing, oh yeah, well, when we send everything out and the state is just pilfered for all of its wealth, we're not actually better off. We should focus on making this state better for our own people. And it's refreshing to hear you talk about that. Where can people go for more information to get connected with your campaign?
So you can go to edwardsforohio.com. I've been endorsed by JD Vance. I've been endorsed by Bernie Moreno. We kind of got a late jump into the race. The other thing, I want to say is, down where I'm from, we make sure that we put our money where our mouth is. When we care about issues, down my way, we don't go and buy products that disagree with us. I'll give you a prime example. When Dylan Mulvaney was put on us, a man dressed as a woman in Southeast Ohio, we quit drinking Bud Light.
Absolutely.
It wasn't going to happen. And, a lot of people, and especially in Republican primaries, they run around and they say the three magic words: I'm pro-God and pro-life and pro-gun. You really got to dive into people and backgrounds. I don't care if they're perfect. I don't care if they made mistakes in their life. I don't care. What I want is a fourth prong on that, and it's pro-common sense, which actually meshes over all those other three things.
Absolutely.
And that means you got to put your money where your mouth is. When I make investments, when I buy things, the coffee I buy, I make sure I'm not giving money to these globalists. I'm not giving money to the BlackRocks and Vanguards. When I buy food, sometimes it's unavoidable, and I get that, but you got to make a conscientious effort. And the people where I come from, that's what we do. In my investments and my strategy and my portfolio, I'm not giving any money to BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street and these banks and these organizations or any of these people.
Because
so I don't think it's enough for us right now. We've gotten down this path of John Kasich and Mike DeWine and the Speaker and the Senate President. We've gone down this path by allowing them to come around and say, oh, I'm pro-life and pro-God and pro-gun, and I'm a conservative and I believe in this and I believe in that, and I'm gonna do all this stuff for my district. We need to be more prominent on what is your everyday life like? What are you doing to actually protect freedoms? What are you gonna do for me? What are you gonna protect me from? And I think this message that I'm taking around, and I'm getting a ton of love from grassroots organizations and all kinds of Republican groups all over the state, is I'm talking about things that nobody talks about. I'm talking about these common sense things. I'm talking about the Somalis in South Columbus. I'm talking to I'm talking to hunters. I spoke at the Big Buck Club, and I'm an avid hunter and grew up hunting with my dad every year. I went to the High Big Bucks conference and spoke to him. Yeah, I talked to him about things I worked on and growing up, and it was about spending time with my dad and being in the woods and relieving stress. But I also talked to him about property taxes. You want to talk about a threat to hunting and why these hunting organizations, and by the way, some of these other gun groups are supposed to be sportsmen's organizations, but they're not really. But, you go down this path, it's like, why aren't they talking about property taxes? You want to talk about a burden on somebody? You can't own any property. If you don't own any property, you can't go deer hunting. Why don't we get involved in some of these conversations? Oh, by the way, the Somali fraudulent issue too. They keep bringing up $24 billion it takes to cut property taxes in the state. That number shrinks quite a bit if we quit giving money to stadiums and start cracking down on Somali fraud. All these things are intertwined with each other, and why we get a 24-hour news cycle where people talk about it. And we rely on a 22-year-old independent journalist named Nick Shirley to bring this kind of stuff up. Then it just goes away. We got to keep talking about it. And my main goal in this is call out Republican elected officials, call out Republican issues, call out Democrats on all the stuff that they're doing. Right now, they're not the enemy in this state. It's Republicans in this state. And making sure we bring back taxpayer trust into the state of Ohio. We're going to have systems in Ohio with the technology. We're still using 1970s ACH technology from the 1970s. We're going to bring back technology where every person in the state of Ohio can track where every single dollar of their taxpayer money is being spent. And we're going to try to make sure all your local governments are covered by that as well.
It's refreshing to hear somebody talk about using a statewide office to try to influence the political life for the benefit of the people of Ohio. Jay Edwards,
they don't like it. They don't like it very much, Chris. They don't like it. All of them have come out of the woodwork donating. I'm getting calls from some of my typical donors that said the Speaker of the House just called me and told me not to give any money to you and give money to your opponent. And I mean, I'm fighting with one arm tied behind my back, and that's fine. I'll take it on because when I win, I owe nobody nothing, and I will have every right to go in there and take these people on. And these people that are in Columbus that pretend to be Republicans and pretend to have people's rights, they're good on some issues, but on the issues that matter, which is your independent freedom, they fall behind, and our state's been left behind for a long time. I'm going to do it. I'm telling you, and these people are going to hate me even more when I'm constantly coming on your show, coming on your podcast. Oh, by the way, Jobs Ohio, the president of Ohio State just got caught having a sexual relationship with a woman, and he had to resign. And it came out in that investigation that she ran a podcast, and the president went to Jobs Ohio and got her to pay him $15,000 a month for that podcast. So, Chris, I don't know if the next president of Ohio State is going to be a woman. Maybe you should start up a relationship. Maybe you can get $15,000 an episode from Jobs Ohio. We wouldn't even know about that if Ted Carter wouldn't have got caught up in that scandal. What other money is Jobs Ohio spending that we don't know anything about? Something's got to be done about this, but I think you should make a hard effort to try to get Jobs Ohio to get you $15,000 an episode up here.
My relationship with my wife is just fine. It is intact. It is fantastic. So thank you very much. Jay Edwards, candidate for Ohio State Treasurer, thank you so much for coming on and explaining where you are and what you're going to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. We'll see you.